instead of Kody saying, hey, do you need some help with Isabel's party because it's his daughter? God.
Welcome back to Glogosups USA, the home of shocking truths, raw emotion, and stories TLC didn't dare show. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a storm that's been brewing for over a decade, and now it's finally unleashed. You've heard whispers. You've seen glimpses. But what we're about to tell you will make everything you thought you knew about the Brown family crumble like dust in the desert wind. This isn't just another update. This is Christine's reckoning, and Kody Brown is about to face the consequences of everything he tried to bury. It all started long before cameras were rolling. Long before Robyn ever set foot in the family. Back then, Christine believed she was part of something sacred, a family, a vision, a covenant. Right? She dedicated herself to it blindly, loyally. Every morning began with Kody. Every thought ended with Kody. She molded herself to fit into his needs, into his ever-shifting moods, into a family structure that fed his ego and ignored her soul. But then Robyn arrived and everything changed. Christine didn't want to believe it at first. But from the moment Robyn entered the family, Kody's attention shifted like a spotlight, and it never swung back. He claimed he wanted to elevate everyone to Robyn's level. But what did that even mean? Was it about love? Respect? Communication? Was it about control? About molding his wives into something they were never meant to be? Christine saw it all happening in real time, and still she stayed. She hoped. She endured. I was probably more fixated on that man than anything, Christine once whispered, her voice thick with regret. My life revolved around what he wanted, what the family needed. I didn't even see myself anymore. The words didn't come easily. It took years, decades to admit them. And when she finally did, it was like cutting herself open in front of the world. And now she's done waiting. Christine Woolley. No longer just the third wife. No longer just the background support to a crumbling patriarch is stepping into her own story. And she's bringing the truth with her. The book. That's where everything begins again. She holds it like it's alive. A memoir, maybe, but it reads more like a battle cry. The cover looks calm, polished, deceptive. But inside? Fire, secrets. Just as Christine didn't write this to entertain, she wrote it to liberate. Not just herself, but every woman who ever stayed too long. Every mother who watched her children get neglected while the man who promised everything gave them nothing. September 2nd. That's the day it all changes. That's when Christine's book hits shelves and sends shockwaves through Kody's carefully constructed kingdom. And make no mistake, he's terrified. So is Robyn. They've spent months trying to spin the narrative, to brace for impact. But Christine isn't holding back. Not anymore. For over 10 years, she smiled on screen while dying inside. Viewers saw the smiles, the sacrifices. But they didn't see the tears in the middle of the night, the loneliness, the quiet betrayals, the favoritism that felt like a knife. She watched as Kody leaned into Robyn while pulling further and further away from the rest. And still, she stayed, till she didn't. What Kody didn't count on, what he never saw coming, was that Christine was watching, listening, remembering. She wasn't loud about it. She didn't fight back on camera. But she was documenting everything. Every slight, every rejection, every time he made her feel small. And now that quiet patience has become her greatest weapon. In interviews, Christine has promised something that has Kody panicking. The truth, not the sanitized version. Not the TLC cut. The real story, the parts too raw for TV, the scenes too painful for producers, the words no one dared speak until now. And while she's calm on the outside, there's fire underneath. Because this isn't just about telling her side. It's about reclaiming her power. He said she was dramatic, that she exaggerated, that she played the victim. But when Christine filed for custody, there was no drama, just silence, strength, precision. September 2024, the courtroom, not the living room, became her battleground. No cameras, no staged family meetings, no Kody monologues. Just lawyers, judges, and facts. She filed quietly, legally, powerfully. And that's when everything shifted. Kody panicked. He retaliated fast, filing his own counterclaim like a wounded king trying to defend a castle already lost to time. But this wasn't his arena anymore. He couldn't charm his way through it, couldn't guilt-trip anyone, couldn't pull rank or flash his spiritual badge. The courtroom demanded receipts, proof, accountability. And for the first time in decades, Kody had none. Behind closed doors, without a single camera rolling, Christine did what no one thought she would. She won. Paternity was formally established. A parenting schedule was finalized. And the dagger, the court ordered Kody to pay child support. Real, enforceable support. For a man who once used money as control, who mocked his wives for asking for help, who treated finances like a leash, this ruling shattered his pride more than any TV moment ever could. And the most brutal part? Christine never gloated, never posted, never gave a soundbite. She didn't need to. The law spoke for her, and it hit Kody like a hammer. Each month, as the payments leave his account, it's not just money. It's a reminder that he lost, that he failed, that the woman he once dismissed as too emotional was the one who finally held him accountable. Behind the scenes, Kody seethed. Not rage, not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that bruised beneath clenched jaws and fake smiles. On the outside, he brushed it off like it was nothing. But inside, he was unraveling. Because this wasn't just about cash. It was about control, the very thing he built his kingdom on. And now Christine had stripped it from him piece by piece, without yelling, without fighting, without even stepping into his world. She left his world and built her own. And she didn't do it for revenge. She did it for survival. Christine now lives in a space that isn't ruled by guilt or obligation. Her home with David Woolley is quiet, real, loving, everything Kody never gave her. And while he stumbles to keep control of a collapsing narrative, she's thriving. Not just emotionally, legally, financially, spiritually. She's not just free, she's fortified. Kody, on the other hand, is realizing what real accountability feels like. For years, he controlled the edit. TLC showed what he allowed. But the courtroom doesn't do edits. It doesn't care about your tears unless they come with evidence. And it sure doesn't care about your spiritual leadership if it doesn't show up on paper. Christine's silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And now, as she prepares to release her memoir, the silence is over. This is just the beginning. The countdown has begun. The cameras might have stopped rolling, but Christine's story is just starting. And as each chapter drops, the legacy of Sister Wives isn't just being questioned, it's being rewritten. One truth at a time, at a time.
Just a boy. Young men and young women, or men and women, should both do the same thing. You protect yourself.
Welcome back to Glogosops USA, where we don't just tell stories. We expose the truths buried behind staged smiles and carefully edited confessionals. Last time, we saw Christine Woolley take a silent stand that echoed louder than any TLC finale. But tonight, we go deeper. Because what happened after that courtroom ruling didn't just haunt Kody. It began to dismantle the illusion that Robyn Brown was ever truly safe. The child support order was just the beginning. What followed was something far more devastating: the loss of control and the rise of consequences. In the eyes of the ICE law, it wasn't about spiritual wives or family politics. It was about facts, documents, dates, medical bills, testimonies, missed birthdays, missed payments, emotional abandonment. And Christine had it all laid out in black and white. Kody tried to frame it as a betrayal, an attack from a bitter ex-wife. But the judge didn't see drama. The judge saw a mother showing up, while the father had only shown excuses. That's what Kody never planned for. Losing Christine was one thing. Losing his grip on the narrative, that was everything. For years, he had been the storyteller, spinning his version of the truth, casting himself as the burdened patriarch trying to hold together an ungrateful family. But now, someone else had taken the pen. And they weren't interested in fairy tales. The tremor hit Robyn first. She felt it before Kody did. The image they had spent years constructing, the noble, misunderstood couple fighting to preserve unity, began to splinter the moment that court order was signed. It hadn't even settled into the system before whispers started crawling. Through fan forums, Reddit threads, and Facebook groups. Screenshots, dates, calculations. Viewers weren't just speculating anymore. They were compiling, investigating, counting receipts. And for once, Robyn's tears weren't enough to stop the bleeding. Her silence spoke volumes. No statement, no defense. Just a blurry paparazzi photo of Kody wandering through an airport, looking like a man who had misplaced everything. His posture collapsed, his shirt wrinkled and half untucked. No wife in sight, just a man with nowhere to land. And Robyn. She tried to hold the line. She gave vague sound bites about grief and healing and family unity. But even her carefully practiced voice trembled when pressed about the ruling, because deep down she knew the system had just done what the wives couldn't. It had pierced the Brown family bubble. And it left no room for smoke and mirrors. They had built their world on whispered promises, spiritual ranks, and emotional manipulation. But the court wasn't buying what Kody was selling. And the public. They were no longer willing to pretend either. Christine wasn't seen as a rebellious wife anymore. She was being recast, finally, as what she had always been. A protective type mother. A woman forced to survive a system that expected her to be grateful for scraps. Her quiet victory wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. And Robyn felt that symbolism like a knife. Because if Christine could win without screaming, without theatrics, just with facts and strength and silence, what did that mean for the story Robyn had been selling all these years? The myth was dying. It's the myth that Kody was a good man, unfairly burdened by difficult wives. The myth that Robyn was the one who stayed loyal while the others gave up. The myth that the breakdowns were due to selfishness, not suffocation. And if those illusions died, then so did Robyn's position in the story. Suddenly, she wasn't the favored one. She wasn't protected. She was just another woman clinging to a sinking man. Kody thought control was his currency. Spent it like a king, handing out affection like rewards, withdrawing attention as punishment. He dangled financial support like a leash, reminding each wife of who held the purse strings. But Christine didn't just cut the strings. She walked away with the scissors. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She filed. She showed up, and she left that courtroom with something no wife in Kody's world had ever walked away with, a judge's signature affirming her truth. And Kody, he was shattered, because she did the one thing he always mocked her for even thinking about. She dared to go legal. He had laughed at the idea, told her she wouldn't survive a legal battle, that he'd bleed her dry, that she didn't have the stomach for it, but she did. And when she filed those papers in September 2024, something broke in him. He didn't shout, he didn't rage, he simply deflated. The old tactics no longer worked. The guilt trips, the twisted spiritual teachings, the empty threats. Christine wasn't scared of him anymore. She didn't ask for permission to see her child. She didn't wait for his approval. The law had stepped in, and where his neglect once reigned, structure replaced it. Schedules, payments, orders. Real consequences. What shook Kody most wasn't the money. It was what it represented. A system had finally said, you don't get to choose when you're a father. You either are or you aren't. And Christine, she had stopped asking, she had stopped waiting, and that terrified him. But beneath that terror was something even darker, paranoia. Because if Christine could win, who else might rise next? Could Janelle follow? Could the older children? The ones he ignored, pushed away, and alienated start asking questions too. Start seeking their own truths. The cracks in his kingdom were no longer symbolic. They were legal. And Robyn, she felt them in the walls of her own home. She had always believed she was different, the exception, the favorite. While the other wives wept, she stood tall beside Kody, convinced that their unity would protect them, that loyalty would shield her. But when Christine walked out of that courtroom with a child support order in one hand and a book deal in the other, Robyn's world began to tremble. Not because she doubted Kody's love, but because she realized, maybe for the first time, that love wouldn't be enough to save them. Behind closed doors, the atmosphere shifted. Kody was no longer the devoted partner she remembered. He sulked in silence, bitter and haunted. He muttered about betrayal, about enemies, about Christine's disrespect. But he didn't look at Robyn the same way anymore. And when she tried to comfort him, he recoiled, as if she were part of the collapse instead of his shelter from it. The emotional intimacy they once flaunted in interviews, the bond that seemed unshakable, was now threadbare and strained. Their conversations became transactional, tense, and every time she brought up the future, he shut down, paranoid, suspicious, distracted by fear. Fear of what Christine would do next. Fear of losing more than just money. Fear of losing the one thing he had always protected above all else, his image. And then came the whispers. Online forums, blogs, TikToks. Even Mary, once silent, began making veiled remarks during her live streams. The questions began to swirl. Was Robyn truly Kody's rock? Or just his last crutch? Her picture-perfect persona, the composed wife and staged family portraits, began to crack. People noticed. The trembling lip, the glassy eyes, the way she seemed to shrink beside Kody instead of shine. The woman who once looked untouchable now looked like someone barely holding it together. And deep down, Robyn knew Christine's book wasn't just a memoir. It was a loaded weapon. Robyn never saw it coming. She thought she was shielded, cloaked in Kody's favor, guarded by his adoration, insulated from the judgment the other wives had suffered. But Christine's quiet fire changed everything. And no matter how Robyn tried to spin it, whisper it away, or hide behind vague live sessions and spiritual lingo, she couldn't outrun the truth anymore. The system had spoken, and now the consequences were circling closer to her than she ever imagined. She used to believe her proximity to Kody was protection, that standing by his side, defending him, absorbing his pain, would make her indispensable. But now, with every court ruling, every document filed, every Reddit thread dissecting the unraveling of their kingdom, it became brutally clear the storm wasn't just coming for Kody, it was coming for her too. And unlike Christine, Robyn had nowhere to run, no new life, no David, no peace. Just a shrinking castle and a king who no longer ruled. Christine's court victory wasn't just about child support. It was a tectonic shift. For years, Kody had dangled money like a noose, claiming he was providing, when in reality he was controlling. He weaponized financial dependence, guilted the women for needing help, then mocked them when they asked. But Christine flipped the script. When she filed for custody and support, it wasn't revenge. It was reclamation of power, of dignity, of the right to say no without fear of being punished. The judge's signature wasn't just ink on paper. It was an explosion under the foundation of the Brown family mythology. Kody's self-styled role as the sacrificial father, the spiritual martyr, gone. In its place, a man who had to be, forced by the law to show up, to contribute, to be present. Christine didn't throw tantrums. She didn't sob into the camera. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for her. Her years of loyalty, her sleepless nights, the parenting she did alone. And now, Christine had what Kody never expected: receipts, legal receipts, emotional receipts, and public support. While Kody spiraled, she rose, with grace. with poise, with the steady fury of a woman done being dismissed. Her strength didn't look like shouting. It looked like silence that held power. Calm that terrified. And Robyn, she saw it too late. Because the real twist, Christine never wanted vengeance. She wanted fairness. And it's that clarity, that unwavering sense of justice that made her win so devastating. Kody had screamed about betrayal, cried about being misunderstood, but Christine never fought dirty. She just stopped playing the game. And in doing so, she rewrote the rules. Kody, meanwhile, couldn't handle the silence. He unraveled in places where no one could edit his breakdown, pacing airport lounges alone, muttering to himself, his shirt rumpled, his eyes hollow. No Robyn to soothe him. No cameras to protect him. Just the reality of what he'd lost. And what was still coming. And Robyn? She kept her mouth shut. Not in loyalty, but in fear. Because she knew the court ruling wasn't an isolated hit. It was a crack in the dam. And behind it was everything they'd hidden. All the secrets. All the manipulation. All the damage they'd inflicted or allowed. Her image, once so carefully curated, had begun to corrode. People no longer saw her as the loyal wife. They saw her as complicit, as someone who stayed silent while other women drowned. And as Christine smiled in new photos with David, with genuine joy in her eyes, the internet noticed. And every post chipped away at the lie Kody had tried so hard to sell, that he was the victim. That he was holding it all together. The truth. He had already lost everything. And Robyn was losing too. Not just her position, but her protection. This wasn't just about a family breakup anymore. It had become cultural dot for over a decade. Sister wives sold the image of functional polygamy centered on Kody, the overwhelmed yet noble leader. But Christine's revolution blew that narrative apart. It revealed the cracks in that spiritual unity, exposed them as control, suppression, and patriarchal dominance masquerading as faith. Women across the world trapped in similar dynamics saw themselves in Christine. They remembered how they too had been told to smile while crumbling, to bake bread while being erased. And when Christine walked into court and walked out victorious, it wasn't just a personal win. It was a message, a mirror, an invitation. What if they could do the same? And that's what terrified Kody most. Because Christine's win wasn't just about her anymore. It was contagious. Her refusal to play along gave others permission to question, to speak, to stop sacrificing themselves for the illusion of unity. Suddenly, Kody wasn't the misunderstood husband. He was the architect of his own destruction. The myth of polygamy as a spiritual calling had been stripped to reveal what it truly was, a system where one man got to control everything. And everyone else was expected to thank him for it. Christine's memoir, still weeks from its release, already loomed like a thundercloud. And Kody, he felt every drop before the storm hit. Because he knew what she was holding back. He knew the stories she hadn't told, the ones TLC edited out, the ones the other wives were too scared to speak aloud. And now she was ready to say them all. And she wouldn't be whispering, she'd be publishing. This wasn't just a tell-all, it was a reckoning. A long overdue dismantling of the empire he'd built. Not on love, but on fear, silence, and control. And the public wasn't laughing anymore. They weren't pitying him. They were remembering. They were rewatching. They were rethinking everything. Because Christine didn't need to convince anyone of her truth. They had already seen it. They watched her cook, smile, serve, soothe while being ignored. They watched her hurt and stay. Down, they were watching her leave. Leave with power, with peace, with the story finally in her hands. And they were cheering for Kody. That was the most painful loss of all, because he could survive court orders. He could survive child support payments, but he couldn't survive the death of his narrative. The public no longer believed in his pain. His tears didn't move them. his justifications fell flat. Even his defenders were growing quiet, unsure how to spin this unraveling into something noble. And Robyn, she was cracking. Her soft-spoken persona, her spiritual rhetoric, her wide-eyed innocence, it was all starting to read as complicity. Her silence was no longer seen as grace. It was guilt. And when Mary, quiet, careful Mary, began dropping cryptic comments, online, even longtime fans started to question everything. Was Robyn really the peacemaker or the enabler? Christine's revolution wasn't bloody, wasn't violent. It was quieter, smarter. It happened in court filings and book deals, in photos of joy, in silence that echoed louder than any fight. And most dangerously, it invited others to rise too. Janelle had seen it. Mary had noticed. Even the adult. Children long held at bay by guilt and gaslighting were beginning to ask harder questions. The house of spiritual cards Kody had built was trembling, and the man who once sat at the center delivering monologues and commands now sat alone, bitter, broke, and powerless. Christine's memoir will drop soon, and when it does, the story will no longer belong to Kody. It will belong to the women who lived it, the ones who smiled while being silenced, who stayed too long, who were told they were dramatic, emotional, ungrateful. And when Christine speaks, she'll be speaking for all of them. She'll be naming the truth. And for Kody, that's a nightmare no amount of spiritual talk can outrun. He always thought he'd get the final word, but this time, it's Christine's turn. Christine's turn.